Hot takes and unpopular opinions play a big role in society. They challenge the status quo and force people to think critically. They promote diverse perspectives and minority views, and sometimes they can spark change in thought processes and how content is consumed and talked about. Today, I'm going to be reacting to some total drama hot takes and unpopular opinions. None of these are mine, at least initially, before I add my feedback. Actually, I asked around my campus and even got some friends of friends to give some hot takes that I can react to, so I'm thankful for everyone that contributed to this video. And yeah, I've been holding onto these for months until I got the time to make this video, so yeah, now is the time. It's time to get in here. Starting off with number 1, the love triangle is a great source for drama. Yes, it definitely was. Actually, it was refreshing to see because for a show that's named Total Drama, outside of the Gwent and Duncan saga from the first few episodes of Total Drama Action, that season didn't really have much noteworthy drama. In Total Drama World Tour, the love triangle was one of the highlights of the season and kept it afloat in that middle stretch. Actually, the season really went downhill once Gwen was eliminated and had one of the worst and most boring endgame stretches in all of Total Drama, right there with Total Drama Action. So the fact that the season just fell off strengthens the importance of the love triangle in World Tour. The love triangle came back for Total Drama All-Stars, but it was a watered down version of it where in World Tour there were more stakes trying to hide it and the fallout was explosive, whereas in this season everything already happened and a lot of the content consisted of Courtney just being so stuck up, which was not fun to watch. Also, Gwen and Courtney's relationship and Gwen wanting to repair that got more focus than the actual love triangle dynamic with Duncan. Like, Duncan had his own storyline in this season about caring too much about his image, which lessened his role in the love triangle dynamic. There's still a few moments of jealousy and animosity for sure, but this season is really for Gwen and Courtney's relationship. Also, I remember watching the second episode, Evil Dread, and seeing stuff like Lightning, Clowning Around, Joe vs. Heather, and Mal's Awakening. All good stuff, but they didn't get a satisfactory amount of focus because there was also some love triangle drama in this episode. At this point, the love triangle probably should have lasted longer in World Tour, but they already had their moment. This happened years ago, so get over it. This just shouldn't have been in the season and taken away from some unique all-star type stuff like Joe versus Heather, which could only happen on an all-star season. So yeah, the love triangle was good in World Tour, but it was one of the many reasons, actually out of those many reasons, it was one of the bigger reasons for why All-Stars was bad, and just by existing, it put a cap on the season with endless possibilities, so it's half and half. Everyone deserves equal blame in the love triangle. Well, sort of. I'm gonna break it down. Courtney was wrong for being such a controlling girlfriend, literally writing Duncan a 32-page letter outlining his faults and how to fix them if they're going to be in a serious relationship. That's wild coming from her. Actually, Duncan should have wrote that same letter for Courtney because throughout her whole run on Total Drama, there's barely anyone that likes her. Meanwhile, Duncan has swag for days. He has so much drip and riz, and he's just a cool cat. So yeah, Courtney was wrong for wanting Duncan to be her perfect version of Duncan rather than letting Duncan be the perfect version of himself. Also, Gwen and Duncan were wrong for having a romantic connection while having the knowledge that Duncan and Courtney were still going out, but considering that Courtney was such a terrible girlfriend, I'm giving Duncan some leeway here for wanting to jump ship. His only misstep was not notifying Courtney and ending things the right way before he started loving on Gwen. So Duncan gets exempt from a lot of blame, while Courtney and Gwen deserve an equal amount of blame. Also, speaking of the love triangle, I just want to slap a take onto the end of this one and like consolidate them a bit because they overlap. It says that Gwunkin is better than Dunkney. Yes, Gwen and Duncan were more alike and they flat out just had more chemistry together. Like I said, the way that Gwunkin got together wasn't right, but once they got together, they were one of the best couples in the show for sure. Scott and Zoe should have been in the All-Stars finale. As the season was written, no, it wouldn't be satisfying because they had separate and distant journeys for the most part, Zoe being somewhat wrapped up in the Mal plot, while Scott was comic relief and he had Scottney, so it would have just been random. But what would have made sense is if they retained their rivalry from Revenge of the Island and went at it again and made it to the finale in All Stars. But like I said, they already had a rivalry in Revenge of the Island and lasted until the final 4 and final 3, so it would just be a retread of something that was already seen. So regardless of which version of Scott they use, they should not have been in the finale of All Stars. Actually, moving away from Scott and Zoe, what would have made sense for All Stars was a Gen 1 versus Gen 2 finale where they take one of Lindsay, Sierra, or Courtney, preferably Lindsay, then they match that person up with anyone from Gen 2 outside of Lightning and Cameron because they already won. That's what the finale should have been, but also it was understandable why they went with Revengers in the final 2 because it was the new season and Gen 1 already had their shine for 3 whole seasons. Meanwhile, Revenge only had one shortened 13 episode season, so they had to give them a part 2 of sorts. That's understandable. But getting back to the main point, no, Scott and Zoe shouldn't have been in the finale. If it had to be all Gen 2, I would go with Joe and Scott. Beth and Justin were good in action. Nah, I actually like to think that there's a reason why Beth didn't return for World Tour and Justin was flat out replaced by Alejandro in World Tour. These two just didn't provide much. Justin only got a few episodes of villainy until he faded into the background, especially when Courtney got there. And Beth was always in the background when compared to such loud personalities like Lindsay, Duncan, Courtney, Lashana, Harold, and even Owen. Owen and Courtney weren't amazing characters, but like I said, all of them had loud personalities that commanded a lot of screen time, making Justin and Beth an afterthought. Lindsay should not have made the Total Drama Action finale. Well, actually, she should have. Out of the realistic possibilities that could make it to the finale, she was the best option. She had a good development in her character in this season by becoming more of a leader and standing up for herself, and she brought so much fun to this boring season. So yeah, it would have been nice to see her make the finale along with Duncan. This is going to be a 2-for-1 and I'm just going to combine them because there's going to be some overlap. Julia is better than Heather and Heather never got character development. Yes, Julia is way better than Heather both as a villain and a character. Heather had way too much plot armor in Total Drama Island, just skating by many rounds because she won immunity based on luck or bad challenge rules, and even when she didn't win, the elimination mechanics were bad, like the Hook, Line, and Screamer episode and the After the Dock of Shame episode. Then in action, she wasn't a relevant character. Then in World Tour, she coasted while Alejandro did all of the heavy lifting. She didn't even have this redemption arc that they wanted to set up at the end with everyone rooting for her to win, because throughout the season, Heather did nothing to earn their support. She didn't change her personality at all. The only thing that happened was that Alejandro came along and he was more unlikable than her. Then in All Stars, she wasn't amazing, she wasn't egregious, she was just fine for her 6 episode run. Meanwhile, Julia never had an instance of plot armor because throughout her whole run, she's an established challenge beast, and in the second season, she gained an actual strategic game and everything that she accomplished was within the realm of reality. Also, she developed as a character more than Heather, once being a person that never wanted any friends, and that was one of the reasons why she was sent home at the final 4 because there was no one on her side when she eventually lost the challenge. But in season 2, she and MK became really good friends and dominated the game, and throughout their adventures, Julia realized the value of having a friend. Also, she's just a way more entertaining character than Heather, so the folks that said this really clicked with these takes. Alejandro wasn't a good antagonist. No, he's the best villain and antagonist in the series. I already said why in a video on my channel, so for a short rundown, he's an entertaining character, just eliminating his competition in style, and he never really relied on plot armor. One of the least plot armored main characters in all of Total Drama, so no, Alejandro is not a bad antagonist at all. Damien would not be a good winner. Very true. This was said when season 2 of the Total Drama Island revival was airing. When the first 8 or so episodes came out, I gave him credit for being a better character when actually he wasn't. All that really happened was that he won an invincibility challenge, found an invincibility statue, and he made it further. He didn't work and make connections with anyone to get in that position, nor did he become a better character at the end of the day. He had very little plot significance to anyone or anything, and he really just coasted to get where he was. In that final 6, the only person that he would have been a better winner than was Priya because she already won and she was insufferable in this season, but outside of her, it's great that no one had to get their run cut short just for Damien, so this is a good take for sure. All Stars is a great season. No. The season had the potential to be a great season, and really, with the cast that they were able to assemble, there was no excuse for it being as bad as it was, but the voice actors can only carry so much. The writers just completely let them down. I already explained why it's a bad season when I ranked all of the seasons, but for a short rundown, Sam and Sierra don't belong. Same with the love triangle continuation that I talked about a few takes ago. Also, in the beginning, they tried to cram in a bunch of storylines into these episodes, which just didn't work when it came to giving them the right amount of spotlight, and this was surprising because Revenge of the Island, the season right before it, functioned well with the 13 episode format. Even Pahkitew Island, while not being a good season of Total Drama, still executed the 13 episode format better. Also, just about all of the characters were watered down to make Mal look like such a boss, especially Alejandro, Zoe, and Cameron. Also, the season ended with the island that started it all sinking underwater. So no, this is not a good season at all. Actually, it's the worst season of the main series. Sky is better than Zoe. Well, it's mid versus mid, but actually it depends. If it's Sky versus All-Star Zoe, then yes, Sky is a better character than Zoe, and since I already explained why in my video about ranking every protagonist, I'll just give a short rundown. Zoe was just way too overpowered and had way too much plot armor to even be taken seriously, while I didn't like the way that Sky just coasted to the end of the game, but at least it wasn't egregious. Also, her relationship with Dave had more complexity. She isn't just a love-struck idiot like Zoe. Sky wants to win, and I love that about her, but it affects how she can interact with Dave while the game is going on. Sky isn't a perfect character like Zoe, she's just more bearable. But for Revenge Zoe versus Sky, it's close because Zoe had a nice journey out there with her finding the friends that she never really had. Revenge Zoe is going to get the edge. Commando Zoe was epic, and Sky never really had anything like that, so that's gonna decide it. But for overall, I'm not going to go through with that because Sky didn't get another season to compare with Zoe's second season, so there's no telling how she would have progressed. Meanwhile, Zoe has a whole 2-season story, so it's not a fair comparison. But yeah, Revenge Zoe is better than Sky, but Sky is better than All-Star Zoe. Courtney is better than Dunkney. Well, any ship that includes Courtney is already bad by default, but no, Courtney was always a very odd relationship, and they flat out didn't have nearly as much chemistry as Courtney and Duncan. Also, despite being bossy and controlling nearly all the time, Courtney treated Duncan better while she looked at Scott as somewhat of a bumbling idiot. Like, when Duncan was in love, I just couldn't imagine Courtney gossiping and making fun of Duncan behind his back and drawing a literal rat tail on Duncan. Like, she really didn't think too highly of Scott when compared to Duncan. Also, Courtney just never had anything close to the basic straining episode, so they're both horrible ships, but Duncan was better. Alejandro's world tour ending is better. Well, it depends. His actual ending is lackluster. Both endings were really Heather-centric and made for her to win, but just looking at everything that transpired in the season of Total Drama World Tour, then yes, Alejandro is way more satisfying of a winner than Heather. It's actually good that he got an official ending unlike Julia, because that can be held over her head probably forever. I don't see Julia winning in a future season, so the fact that she didn't win, that can be held over her head when it comes to potentially rating how good of a character she was. But Alejandro, regardless of which ending is better or more satisfying, at the end of the day, he still won. He still has a version where he won, and nothing can take away from that. He'll always be a Total Drama winner. So yeah, his ending wasn't amazing, but his journey throughout World Tour was one of the best single season stories in all of Total Drama. So the fact that he won, the fact that he at least got an ending, is satisfying. Season 2 Millie was fun. No, I could tell by the way she was written and how she didn't care about Damien getting banged up. I could tell that she was supposed to be funny, but no. Plus, she only had a 3-episode run, and she's fighting for screen time with MK and Julia and Caleb and Priya and Ripper and Axel. Like, no, she didn't really get the chance to bring much of anything to this season. But the one thing that I can give her is that she wasn't insufferable like in her previous season. She was more of a neutral, but no, she wasn't a fun character at all. DJ is the most robbed player. He had some tough eliminations, but it's not him. The most robbed player was Lindsay. In Total Drama Island, first off, the whole challenge that she competed in the Off the Chain episode was nonsense. They had to make their own bikes. That's fair, but in the first round, they had to race someone else's bike, but it didn't matter if the person crossed the finish line. They just needed their bike to cross the finish line, which was problematic because no one was riding their own bike, so they really had no control on the outcome. Then in the finals, they're racing for immunity, but the last person to cross the finish line gets eliminated, which means that immunity doesn't even matter. Plus, it means that the ones that didn't even qualify for the finals get immunity, which is very problematic considering that Lashana and Izzy didn't even show up to the race. Also, Lindsay was the last person to cross the finish line, but Owen and Duncan crashed out, so Lindsay got punished for performing better than them. It led to a great moment, but the challenge was weak. And not to change topics, but it's not the first time that certain challenge structures and game mechanics weren't thought through or executed well in the first season. But yeah, she gets an unfair elimination in Island. Then in action, she fell victim to Courtney's plot armor, just turning her into a god player and being able to destroy the entire hotel room, which got rid of the extra 10 seconds that Lindsay should have had to destroy things. Also, she voted herself out, which shouldn't count, but that was just a lazy way to get rid of her, and in that one episode, they ruined her season-long development just to make that happen. Then in World Tour, she got eliminated over a malcontent in DJ that wanted to leave, like, just quit the game. Then in All Stars, it was Courtney's fault for assigning Lindsay to the baby carriage and running back and forth, but at that point, they derailed her character so much that she was useless, so All Stars gets a pass. She was robbed of a better character, but considering the circumstances, she wasn't robbed in All Stars. But yeah, after saying all of that, Lindsay was definitely more robbed than DJ. Eva should have been brought back for another season. Yes, and the perfect place would have been in Total Drama Action, especially since she already had a bad temper and could have probably slid into the antagonist role easier than Justin, where the guy was just a different character in Action and he wasn't that good. Just add more gameplay motives behind Eva's rudeness and she probably could have been a good antagonist. She could have been the antagonist for the whole season instead of the split thing they tried where it was Justin in early Total Drama Action. Then when Courtney entered the game about halfway through the season, she just took his role while Justin faded into irrelevance, and none of them were good in that role. Total Drama Action likes a serious and season-long antagonist like the other season, so Eva would bring the serious part, then just make her last until like episode 24, and yeah, that's a successful run. So yeah, Eva should have got one more season. World Tour is overrated. Well, it depends. It comes down to social circles. I don't talk about this stuff with others that often, so for the most part, it's really only me influencing my opinions. But if you're always around people that are pro World Tour, that's understandable to think that it's overrated. Before I started watching every episode for the rating every episode of Total Drama video, one of my friends told me that World Tour was the best season because they're flying all around the world rather than being stuck at a camp or a filming lot, and it's the musical, and it's Heather's grand redemption, and Heather versus Alejandro, and the love triangle, and all of this good stuff. But as I said in my ranking every season of Total Drama video, this season started to run out of steam after Gwen got eliminated and the love triangle saga ended. Like, it was the only drama keeping the show afloat. And the songs, on the whole, they were a mixed bag, but as they were losing contestants, they couldn't have those big ensemble performances like Come Fly With Us, instant banger, and they had to settle for stuff like We Built Gwen's Face, A Chinese Lesson, and Condor. Definitely some of their worst songs, and they were all in the second half of the season. The season had an amazing start and a solid finale, but have to get there first, and everything beyond episode 16 was boring. So is World Tour overrated? Based on the one guy that I talked to, yeah, he really hyped it up when it's a great but not amazing season. But overall, like I said, it depends. Overrated and underrated are relative terms. Total Drama Action is the worst season. No. When I was watching it for the rating every episode video, I was close to saying it was, but I'm not going to say it's the worst season when there's a season like Redonkulous that's a spin-off that had a different and worse gameplay style than the Island seasons that force interactions to mainly take place within pairs rather than utilizing the whole cast, and because of that, most of the entertainment came from hit or miss challenges. And it's not worse than All Stars, which I've already explained why All Stars is bad in another video, and I gave a short rundown in this video. At a point, I was flat out going to rank Action below All Stars because it was boring, but at least they tried. Some episodes are boring, but they're not actively bad. Like every episode in All Stars Pass, no one expects the Spanish opposition. Right when they got to episode 8, you were gotta be kidding me. I have to say, episode 8 to episode 13 was the worst 6-episode stretch in total drama history. It was between a horrible season that was at least over with quickly in 13 episodes, or a boring and slow 26 episode season that at least didn't reach the lows of All Stars. So I had to go with Action, the one that was just better in quality, and it had way better writing and more time to have a lot of storylines and flesh them out properly, which was what All Stars struggled with. So no, Action is not the worst season, but it's not an amazing season either. It's still a bottom tier season of total drama. Gwen is a problematic protagonist. Well, it depends. If this is only talking about the season that she was the actual main protagonist of, Total Drama Island, then no, she was an amazing protagonist and had the best single season story in all of Total Drama. But looking at her character in multiple seasons like World Tour and her involvement in the love triangle, which wasn't right, and she's supposed to be someone that gets propped up and the audience should root for, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense to call her problematic. Like I said, she and Courtney take an equal amount of blame in the love triangle. Then what this take is probably referring to is in All Stars, Gwen complained about Courtney being mad at her because when she kissed Duncan, Courtney and Duncan were over, which wasn't true. She's just trying to lessen the blame and her involvement in the situation when she was very much in the wrong for kissing Duncan. So this is a fair thing to say. I could see how she is a problematic protagonist and all of her actions shouldn't be presented or taken as good. So this is a good catch for sure. Lindsay versus Justin would have been better than Lindsay versus Harold. I really don't like watching Justin in Total Drama Action. He's just a cringe fest, but this sounds interesting. He started off the season manipulating Lindsay, and as the season went along, Lindsay stopped falling for his tricks and stopped being such a follower. Lindsay and Harold had the most development in this season, and it probably would have been nice to see them get a win to wrap up their story nicely, but Lindsay and Harold operated separately from each other, which has happened. There have been random finales, but there have been finales where friends or enemies face off against each other, which vary in quality, but there's always potential for it to be good. Lindsay versus Justin had more build up and more of a relationship than Lindsay and Harold, and if they would have expanded on their story more and made it somewhat of a rivalry, then yeah, I could see that being a good finale for sure. I would go Lindsay versus Justin, then for Harold, I would go Harold versus Duncan. Pahkitew Island isn't that bad if you turn your brain off. Well, no. Pahkitew Island is actually a mixed bag of a season. I ranked it higher than stuff like Redonkulous, Action, and All Stars, but it's below the obvious elite season, so it's below average to maybe average, but this excuse isn't that good. I'm not turning my brain off and potentially ignoring important details, important developments, or inconsistencies, especially as a person that makes videos on this stuff. The same lazy excuse was used as a defense for the Mario movie. I'm not going to turn my brain off and change how I consume content just to try and enjoy something. No, I shouldn't have to change anything about me to enjoy something. It should just be natural. This was more so about the turn your brain off take than Pahkitew Island, but yeah, there is some truth to what they're saying. Pahkitew Island isn't a good season, but it's a good amount better than something like All Stars. Beth deserved to win more than Duncan. Yes, actually, for my whole life up until 2023, I've accepted Duncan's win more because I love his character, but he didn't deserve to win at all from a story perspective. Gameplay wise, Duncan went quiet after the Gwent saga and just coasted along. barely providing any gameplay or moves of importance in the votes. Meanwhile, prior to the finale, Beth won 2 individual challenges while Duncan won 0, so at least Beth had some impact on the game and earned her place in the game. Also, this season ended with a jury vote and Duncan treated everyone terribly and left on bad terms with folks like Courtney, Harold, and Lindsay, so he's definitely not winning that. So yeah, Duncan is a better character, but Beth winning this season makes way more sense, and before Revival 2023 and 2024, this is the season that only needed one winner because it just makes more sense that way. Lightning deserved to win more than Cameron. Well, only if it's because of the sympathy of it all, with Lightning's father betting all of his championship rings on him. I love that more than Cameron getting his bubble deflated, but although I talked Cameron up in the Protagonist video and said that his ending was great, really this is one of the only finales where each player deserved to win. They're both satisfying winners. I can tell that they were angling for Cameron because of the big focus on the Golden Trio in this season and All-Stars, even though they probably didn't have much knowledge of what was going to happen in All-Stars when they were writing Revenge. The fact that Lightning went out early and Cameron had another solid run just leads me to believe that Cameron was always a favorite of theirs. So they were for sure angling for Cameron, but both endings are good. No one deserved to win more than the other. Katie and Sadie are good characters. No, actually, they're up there for some of the worst total drama characters ever made. They were so annoying. They just screamed, squealed, and cried all of the time, and that just wasn't fun to watch. Total Drama Island is the best season of Total Drama, but it was in no way because of them, especially since they were eliminated relatively early. Also, the fact that they weren't brought back to compete in a future season says a lot. Maybe bring them back for another season like World Tour and develop them more, then they potentially could have been something, but in base form, they're horrible. But I have to give credit to the writers for making every best friend / sibling pairing that followed more bearable than Katie and Sadie, so yeah, that's a dub, but I never want to see Katie and Sadie on my screen ever again. Season 1 is the best season because the show focuses on the characters over the challenges and the characters are normal. Yeah, for sure, some of the best episodes are the ones that focus on 2 characters either having a conflict or strengthening their relationship, or both, like the Basic Straining Dunkney episode and Gwen and Bridget from the Extreme Torture episode, then Gwen and Jeff and Lashana and Duncan from the Trial by Tri-Arm Triathlon episode. Also, although Camp Castaways ranked low in my episode ratings, they still have episodes like that and After the Dock of Shame that take a break away from the game to focus on the characters. And yeah, in this season, the summer camp and game aspects were equal, while in the later seasons, it felt like a game show and they're just staying at a summer camp. It kind of mirrors Survivor in that way. Also, after watching stuff like Pahkitew Island, where everyone is an extreme caricature or a weird person, it's refreshing to watch this season where everyone still had a stereotype that they represented, but the characters were more tame. So yeah, this is a W for sure. Courtney was a bad character in all seasons. No, Courtney was definitely a bad character, but that's because of everything that happened post Total Drama Island. Now, she wasn't a good standout character in Total Drama Island, but she was at least bearable personality wise. Like, she was actually speaking with some sense in this season. The only thing that didn't work was, despite her being the biggest chicken on the island, they kept on letting her skate by over more deserving players, which is an actual legit case of plot armor. Like, the word gets thrown around a lot, but here that's legit because they had to make sure she made it to the basic straining episode. So yeah, overall, she's one of the worst characters in the show, but she wasn't always that way, which is even worse than, say, being a character that started out bad like Rodney, because at least he had no chance from the jump, whereas I saw that Courtney can work. She can be a bearable character, but all of that was lost. Last take, Mike, Cam, and Zoe were unbearable. They got the writer's pet focus in Revenge of the Island, but I didn't mind it for the most part. They actually had a really nice journey with Cameron and Zoe, kind of being these lonely, sheltered people, so they got to go out there and make friends. Also, it was nice that in the end, after a season of hiding his multiple personality disorder, Zoe accepted Mike for the person that he was, and it was a nice ending to their story in Revenge of the Island. No complaints with them in that season, but they just ruined Total Drama All-Stars. They got a lot of focus after just being on the previous season and having deep runs on that season. They merged in both seasons, and two of them are always near the endgame area, with Zoe and Cameron placing third and finale in Revenge of the Island, and Mike and Zoe making it to the finale in All Stars. All of them overstayed, but that's a lot of Zoe. She was in all 26 episodes, which would be fine if she were an interesting character like Julia, and Duncan's another character that always makes deep runs. The general concept of overstaying isn't the problem. If the character is entertaining, I have no problem with them being in as many episodes as possible. The problem is that Zoe peaked as an entertaining character in Revenge of the Island and was just tough to watch in All Stars with how badly they nerfed and buffed her at the same time. A lot of this I already explained in my ranking Protagonist video, but for a short rundown, she's perfect, never being in danger and all of a sudden being a challenge beast. But also, she's so gullible and naive and didn't notice all of the clear hints that Mike was Mal. Same deal with Cameron, the guy that figured out Mike's multiple personality disorder and how to control it. This guy didn't know much about Mal until it was too late, despite having similar evidence and seemingly more knowledge of this disorder than Zoe. And Mike wasn't even Mike for a good amount of this season, so there's that. Mal isn't the worst villain in the show, but there have been better and more grounded villains, and just about everyone on this cast had to take a downgrade just to make him look so wicked, so nefarious. So it's half and half. Amazing in Revenge, but they better be thankful for Courtney, because if it wasn't for her, then I'd say that they're clearly the worst part of All Stars without any hesitation. Alright, that's all I have for today. These hot takes are spicy. Really enjoyed reacting to them.